Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to see you all here, and I'm really pleased that you have the interested to hear about Norwegian food traditions and conservation methods that are going back to the ancient times. And it's really a special situation to do it in Spain, because if it was not for Spain and all the Middle Sea region, the Norwegian food culture would be really, really poor. And if it was not for the Vikings, that were really special people that were out for knowledge and were out for new things that bring it back to Norway. And they enriched Norwegian food culture a lot. As you probably know, Norway is a very special and complicated country. High mountains, deep valleys, everlasting winters, northern lights, and a very long coastline that is giving a lot of food for us today. And Norway is living from the export of fish, oils. We are very known in sports and Olympic winter games. But we also have very rich culture in both arts, music, clothing, but also in food. And in these times, it's really important to take care of that, because we have the responsibility to take all these traditions to the tomorrow children, as Stephen said, about the fish, about sustainability, about all the food that was made in the old way. As you know, Norway is a big country, but only 3% of Norway, like that small part of Norway, has a soil that is sustainable to grow something. And out of these 3%, there's only 1% that we can get some potatoes for us. So it hasn't been funny if it was not another way for us to feed people in Norway. Because another 2% go to the grasses for the animals. 45% we can use for the animals to go in the mountains in the summertime. But when the winter comes, we have to do something about all these animals that we pick up from the mountains. And 52% of Norway are basically only cities, roads, and of course glaciers and districts in Norway that is not capable to grain anything. As you can see, in the old days, Stavanger city was only this small stripe. It was like a small village and a lot of good soil to grow vegetables and to have animals. And today Stavanger city is basically only buildings and roads. And the same with the Tromsø. It was like this big in 1937, and today it's airports, it's roads, it's infrastructure, and like human intervention. It's not like in the old days when the first people came to Norway for like 11,000 years ago, where the hunting, fishing, and the forests were the main survival conditions for them. And they got the rewarding to get into Norway and being rough enough to the climate and being rough enough to the nature and to live in the nature's conditions. There are plenty of animals in the forests. There are a lot of fishes in the water, and they did well, like without potatoes too. And today, hunting is still a very, very deep culture in Norway. Hunting and fishing in the rivers and going to the mountains. People are really taking responsibility, and all the hunting and fishing is under very strictly conditions. It's not just to take a weapon and go and get your deer. The same as in northern Norway, farming of the reindeer is a very, very deep culture yet. And of course, modern farming is a huge culture now, and Norway is developing it rapidly and doing it really responsible in a very sustainable way. Even though we don't have a lot of soil to grow our vegetables or to have good conditions to have all the food in Norway, our country is giving a lot of meals to all the world. And 2.5 million tons of seafood, like white fish, cod family fish, herring, mackerel, shellfish, seaweed, scallops, and everything from the wild sea. 2.5 million tons last year, as farm salmon was 1.28 million. And Norwegian people, they didn't eat 10% of that. So mostly of that goes to the export. What Norwegians eat themselves is a little part of this, a little part of this, and all of this. We eat all our meats, we eat all our wild animals, and we eat all our wild salmon. The things that are going to the export out of these animals is so little that it makes no sense to make it as a point. So actually, without fish, our country would never be so rich in kind of way, and sharing to the rest of the world with a meal and food demand is really high. And of course, we have an issue. What should we do with all these meats and all these fishes? We have to preserve, we have to take care of that, because we cannot eat it right now, right here. It's not grab and go when you get all the boat with the fish, or when you get 200,000 sheep from the mountains in 2 weeks in September. Even though we have McDonald's, frozen pizza, sodas, and all these things that are also part of daily culture, the food culture in Norway is really deep and has long traditions back to the Viking times. And it's based on clean food, climate, and storage conditions. We have flatbreads, smoked sheep heads, we had dried cod, we have sheep stick meat, a lot of cheeses that are world-winning, and of course smoked salmon. And all these traditions are really huge responsibility for us to give further to our children and to give further to the world, so that the world can understand why Norway is standing on the both feet when we're giving food to the world. Vikings, they were really smart people. Not only they were smart in building boats and traveling around the world, but they get back with the knowledge. When the other tradesmen were traveling around the world and buying things for the money, Norwegians, they did not buy things. They had fjord, they had many things from Norway, like down to the Mediterranean areas, and the things they got back again. It was not money. It was not expensive things. It was food, prunes, spices, or some jewelry in the best way. So Norwegians, they were doing exchanging, and every time it was down in the other areas, like not in Scandinavia and in Norway, they get knowledge back home again. And the knowledge was used further. Like in the long houses, there were a lot of partying, a lot of beer, a lot of food. And it's one easy reason. All the farmers that belonged to the same village, they were free to choose the earl. Like the earl was the highest Viking in the village. And everyone was free to go to which earl they wanted to go. So every earl wanted to have the strongest people, and the safest thing to convince them to stay was to have good food, enough beer, and enough jewelry for the women. So that's why food was so important and knowledge was so important, that if Vikings could bring back spices and other foods than they had at home, they were much more attractive than the other earls. Easy peasy. Women, they were responsible for flour in the Viking times, and they made flour from the grain like for 1 or 2 days. But then when the mill houses came, the men started to make flour, and then women get the responsibility to take care of that flour. It is quite hard to do it in Norway when it's raining almost all the time, and humidity is very high. The mold is coming into the flour, and then they started baking these flatbreads that were made basically out of flour and water, and then they dried out. Before that, Vikings ate bread like that was made also out of flour and water, made like a plate, and covered with a fish or meat, and they were eating it like very easy. So I'm really excited when we're going on our Viking show, how much Viking is inside you. You have to do it good. The preserving of food is essential. Meats and fish, it is not only for the own consume, but also for the exchanging. And Vikings had a lot of foods with them back to the other countries, and they exchange it all the time. Very easy thing. Did you hear that? All your guests and all your fish start smelling after 3 days. Luckily, we can get rid of our guests, but if we get rid of our fish, it will not bring us so much. We have to survive the whole winter. And the reason why we have to preserve foods, there are bacteria and microorganisms living in the foods. By having knowledge and using nature, we can affect them so that they will do their job in the good way. And we can affect them to do not do the bad job. There are 4 main preservations, like methods to preserve fish and meat. It is drying, salting, curing, and smoking. And all these things, they came one by one, but nowadays they can be mixed and combined, not only for the preservation, but also for the taste and the smell and the consistency of the foods. Drying cod is the oldest tradition in Norway. The weather is perfect. We have a lot of wind. We don't have that much sun. It is shadow. It is very long nights in the winter. So the fish is hanging perfectly. And even now, you can drive along the coastline of Norway, especially northern Norway, and you will see the villages that have these buildings for drying codfish. But it has to be the white codfish because the fat fish is not that good for drying alone. And we stand for a lot of meals of dried fish. It's easy to transport it. It has long lifetime. It is very easy to prepare. You're always sure about the taste and the quality. And what is really interesting, the salt in Norway was not that available in the ancient times until Spanish fishermen started coming to the Newfoundland Islands. And they had a lot of fish that they had to preserve. So they bought salt with them, and they looked at these dried fishes in Norway and said, this is smart. We should do something like that. So they started doing this. They had salt, and they opened the fish, they salt all the codfishes, and laid it out on the rocks on the seaside. And Norwegians, I think they used 2 minutes to look at that and copy-paste and do the same thing. Norway is now is the second important export nation of the fish in the world. And salt-dried cod is the biggest export thing from Norway to Portugal, to Brazil, for both bacalhau, bolinhos, and other delicious meals. In the ancient times, it was women and children and everyone working, because every morning fish has to be laid out, and if you saw rain is coming or humidity is coming high, then they had to put it in the towers and to get the roof on top of them. And the next morning, same procedure again. When the salt came with this salt-dried fish, it started being huge development in the preservation methods. Even people living in the mountains, they could preserve the fishes that they got in the lakes or in the mountain rivers. And here you see the very old picture of the Haugesund city, or town, where Odara is from. It's a small town in the west coast of Norway, and it's called Herring Town. It's also accidentally that this place is herring town, because the herring was coming in the winter. People never knew of, or it was in December, January, and February, but everyone was ready. When the herring was coming, it was huge amounts of that. And all the sailors, all the boats, all the women and the children, they got free from the schools just to work on herrings, because it was a lot of work that has to be done. And in a good year, they could produce 1 million tons of herring in the small town. It's about 20,000 people living in Haugesund. So it's a small place. And today we're still having herring festivals and taking care of this herring salting traditions. When herring is salted in the batches, in the barrels, with layers of salt and herring, salt and herring, salt and herring. They could stay for a couple of years and be traded to all the world. So the world was buying herring from Norway for a very long time. In the mountain regions, the lake fishes were also salted, and the salt is a little bit tricky, because if you use a lot of salt, then you can preserve foods for a couple of years, you can dry them. But if you use less salt, then you can start fermentation. And the fermentation is not only increasing lifetime, it is also increasing nutritional values, because the yeasting process is starting. And in Norway, we have this rakfisk, that is fermented fish, and it's very big traditions in the Christmas time. And there are all levels, of the young fish or the old fish, or intensity of the taste. And this preservation method is the most regulated preservation of the food controlling government in Norway, because you can really destroy a lot, but you can do great things out of fermentation. It can be compared like with a kombucha making, or German people making cabbages in the fermentation. But Norwegians make fish, and it tastes really great. You can have a lot of meals out of this fermented fish, but if you keep it for a smaller time with a less salt and a little bit alcohol, that is also the preservation thing, you can have graved salmon. And it's a fresh salmon, only added alcohol, salt, a pinch of sugar, and flavors if it's wanted. It's often used mustard or dill. Should be a video here. This doesn't want to work. Smoking, my favorite. By smoking meats and fishes, we do not only preserve them, but we give great taste. Or, as in the modern world, we can also give the impression that we give a taste by using smoking acids. So it's very, very important that people also have the knowledge what is smoked and what is smoke taste. Because there are two different things, tasting quite similar, but giving totally different quality for the final product. And smoking can be combined also with salting, drying, and it's like free to play. It's a very old tradition. In Norway, it's been known for 1,000 years after Christus, as in Spain, it's 1,000 years before Christus. So thank you for that one too. Smoking meats, as you can see here, is sheep. It's the whole size of the sheep. This is one of most important traditions in Norway that is getting to the Christmas time. We have meat sticks from the sheep. They are getting from the mountains in September, then we salt them, smoke them, and then we cure them until December. And then they made into small pieces that giving us delicious Christmas foods. And the legs of the sheep, they are cured. They are hanging for a longer time until the Easter, and then we have the cured sheep legs. Learned from Spanish people too. And smoking fish is very young, like salmon, it's a very young tradition in Norway. We didn't start smoking salmon before year 1800. We've been smoking meats, we've been smoking other fishes, but salmon was only salted. So thanks to the one that started that. The smoke has a lot of good things inside. There are acids, there are phenols, they are affecting fish in so many good ways. And the smoke itself started that people had hanging meats nearby a fireplace. And the smoke coming from the fireplace gave a good taste, but also the meat could hang much longer than the meats hanging in the window or the other places. In the smoke that we use for the meats and fish, there are around 300 different chemical stuffs. And if someone is smoking cigarettes, there are 5,000 chemical stuffs. So it's really safe to eat the smoked fishes and meats because we don't have the same smoke as in the smoking cigarettes. And by combining salting, smoking, curing, graving, fermenting foods, we can mix and match. And all these methods, they had enriched all the culture for the Norway because it was able to take care of the meats and the fishes when they come, when the season was available. And fresh meats and fish were not eaten that often in Norway. As for the salmon, there are also different ways to smoke it. It's cold smoking, hot smoking, that gives totally different consistency of the fish and the taste. And of course, what smoke is used. We use fresh junipers, as we do on our cold smoked salmon. We can still fresh the sweetness from the nature. That is so fresh that it's giving amazingly taste to the fish. And like for the hot smoking, we have chosen both cherry trees, apple trees that are from the fruits, that you also get sweet acidity to the fish. So it's both preserving and giving tastes. And we're also drying our smoked salmon. That is giving us salmon chips. A great product for sustainability because we use all the leftovers from our production to make these chips. This is how we make our salmon. It's jumping around. It was very hard to see, but we dry salt the fish together with a cognac and a pinch of sugar, which is taking the water out of the fish. And we destroy the cell membranes of the bad bacteria with the salt, and they cannot survive further. And we also use alcohol, both for the preservation, but also for a little touch of the taste. And then the fish is resting for the 2 days until the good amount of water is taken out. We wash the fish, dry it again, and then smoke on the fresh junipers that we pick for each smoking. And fish is being in the smokehouse for 1 day, then it's resting 1 day, and then smoke again once again, so that the smoke is getting through all the fish. And this is a really old way to do that, and it's a really hard way to do that, because we use 10 days to produce the salmon. From when it comes from Bremnes to us, it takes a lot of time for us to make it final product. And it's also decreasing the value, because out of 1 kilo fish, we can make like 800 grams, 800 grams. As in modern factories, they can make 1.2 out of 1 kilo. So this responsibility that we have, based on the old traditions and all the sustainability and the quality for the clean food, it's so amazingly important for us, so that the next generations also have the knowledge. What should they do? Why all these processes are getting in the fishes or meats, and how to survive. And today, Norway is a very high gastronomic country with a lot of world-known chefs that are also taking traditions further to the world competitions. And they're winning too, because they're showing what the nature can give us, how can we take care of what we get from the nature, and what we can do with that further. So it was Norwegian food on the last Bocuse d'Or competition on Sunday that gave Norway the bronze medal in that competition. And that shows that back to the nature, back to the traditions, giving it a modern look, and just taking care of all the knowledge is giving us further life for tomorrow. Thank you.